From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. One of the great tragedies of our time, something that just really makes me kind of distraught, is the murder of language. It's just been throttled to death by the partisans, and especially by the American neo-fascists. They've got us all fighting over vocabulary, for God's sakes. Socialism versus capitalism, the most prominent example currently. But it happens in every debate at every level. And it's very intentional. I mean, it's tempting to both sides this argument. I myself just used the term fascist. I think I can justify the use of that word. I don't have any qualms about calling the regime a fascist regime. But I have to keep reminding myself as well that it's not just about me and what I understand, what I believe. It's about the person on the other side of this communication. What I know, what I mean, what I understand, what I'm trying to communicate will be, certainly, interpreted by the listener in any one of 100 different ways. So this is just a reminder for all of us. Let's avoid jargon as much as possible and just stick with the issues themselves. Because, as I've noted many times, Americans in large numbers, often supermajorities, agree on individual particular issues, but then when you ask the very same people whether they self-identify as conservative or liberal or progressive or Republican or Democrat, then it all gets balled up. Here's an example. Price controls. In a recent survey asked Americans, should the government enforce price controls in order to combat inflation? 75% of Democrats said yes, they were in favor of government price controls. You know how many Republicans are in favor of government price controls, according to this survey? 54%! 54%. Government price controls. And you guys claim to be horrified at the prospect of socialism? So the very same person who will identify as a conservative, who will claim that socialism is the greatest evil on earth, will also say, yeah, the government should enforce price controls. Our thinking about all these labels, literally about vocabulary, is screwed up. We have to resist the use of language to manipulate us. Whenever you're taking in information about politics, about economics, the big issues of the day, I want you to have your radar up, and I want you to detect the exploitation of jargon. If the speaker isn't giving you information that you can actually use, if they're just trying to manipulate you, you got to know that. And then, for God's sakes, don't repeat the jargon. Don't just mindlessly repeat turns of phrases, labels. Weaponized language, I suppose, is nothing new, but in the hands of very powerful elite, organized against us, against you and me, it's an awesome tool, a frightening prospect that we could be led against our will, almost hypnotically, into thinking and believing things about the world that just are not true. And it's especially heinous when the propagandist is able to deceive, manipulate the listener into acting and advocating against their own interests. And to always be going back to these defining terms, capitalism, socialism, progressive, conservative, liberal. It renders the terms themselves entirely useless, except for the purposes of the propagandist. And yes, language does evolve organically. It always has. But then it's pushed and pulled and prodded in the most unnatural ways, in the most inorganic ways, by those who cynically exploit language for their own purposes. So now it's the old adage, this is why we can't have nice things. I love language. For it to be exploited in these ways represents the very worst in us. There aren't many lower things a person can do than to intentionally exploit, manipulate language to deceive. It's reprehensible. And it's everywhere. I don't have an answer. I don't have a solution. When I am looking for a solution to any problem, you know me, I always gravitate toward systemic solutions. What can we all decide together? I'm usually not the one calling for, oh, well, you just have to be individually responsible. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, I find that the wrong argument to make. Oh, if you're struggling with weight, just eat less, get more exercise. When a whole multi-billion-dollar industry of fast food, processed food, junk food is doing its best to manipulate you at every turn, when government regulators do nothing to help you. Oh, social media, it's addicting, especially for teenagers, but really for everybody, resulting in body shaming and bullying and depression, anxiety. It's never my advice to just limit your time on social media, make individual choices. No, of course not. We need revolutionary, systemic reform on how these social media companies operate, how they make their money, if they should make money at all. I think they should be public utilities. So those are just 2 examples. I could go on and on and on. I don't give individual advice to people. Well, you should do this or you should do that. Now, I say all that as a preface here because I'm about to do it. Until we can figure out a grander, more systemic solution, I do have some personal advice for you. Only because I can't think of anything better. Regarding the murder of language, just don't participate in it. Don't repeat jargon. Don't repeat words or turns of phrases that have been handed down to you by the propagandists. Just don't use them. Remember when it used to be the Democratic Party? Democratic is the adjective. Democrat is the noun. If you were a Democrat, noun, you were in the Democratic, adjective, party. That was common usage for, I don't know, how long has the Democratic Party been around? Since the beginning. Until a few years ago, when conservatives, Republicans started using the word Democrat as the adjective. And this was intentional. This was written in memos. This was not the organic evolution of language. No, it was an intentional move. Don't call them the Democratic Party, they said in memos. Call them the Democrat Party. Don't call it a Democratic initiative or a Democratic bill in Congress. No, it's Democrat bill. The reasoning was that it sounded harsher. It reminds people of bureaucrat, which nobody likes. And the internal word there, subliminally, you're going to hear rat. This was completely intentional. They knew exactly what they were doing. This was not natural evolution of language for the Democratic Party to turn into the Democrat Party. And now it's so common, I've lost all hope for news reporters, media, broadcasters, anchors. I hear them say it all the time, the Democrat Party. You'll hear Democrats themselves use it. So my personal advice to you, until we figure out a better solution, each of us as individuals, we have to stop repeating what we're spoon-fed. When you speak, when you talk about issues, define your terms or avoid them altogether and just talk about the issue itself. I would say the preeminent example today is healthcare. And the jargon around healthcare is mind-boggling. Universal healthcare, accessible, affordable, Medicare for all. On the Republican side, I'm hearing more and more about healthcare price transparency or upfront costs. The argument somehow that requiring hospitals and doctors and insurance companies to clearly and publicly post their price sheets will somehow magically bring overall costs down, because then patients can shop around like they shop around for other goods and services. It's an argument. I believe it's a stupid argument. The point I'm making here is This is a pretty complex and nuanced argument that can be debated. I'm not discounting a debate, but in the world we live in, you're never going to hear that debate. You're going to hear catchy phrases suitable for 30-second ads, for bumper stickers. So whether you're the listener or the speaker, insist on clear language that describes discernible facts and arguments. The minute you start relying on the jargon, nothing good is ever going to come of that. And for those of us who use language on a daily basis, those of us who read and write and listen and speak as our profession, as our vocation, I can tell you, the murder of language is very disheartening. If, on the other hand, and I'll close with an optimistic thought, if we can all decide together to reject the attempted manipulation of weaponized language, the most simple, the most crude, cynical, self-serving use of language as a tool, as a weapon, and instead embrace the beauty of language, its precision, its clarity, all the creative possibilities. Maybe we can come out of this current war against language as victors. Maybe we can come out the other side with a better understanding of how language can advance our ability to create a better world, to understand how language and thought are intertwined, and to use that understanding to our benefit, to ultimately defeat the propagandists. I mean, wouldn't that be a fine thing? All politics is local, so they say. That aphorism credited to Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House in the 1970s and 80s. All politics is local. I don't know. Maybe it was true then. I don't think it's true today. Not by a long shot. It might be just the opposite. All politics is global. Every issue, every decision made from on high affects us at the local level. It's a trickle-down problem. The solutions maybe trickle up. I don't even know if that's true anymore. For a long time, the trickle-up solutions for the climate crisis, or for the environment generally, was for individuals to make the right choices. Well, we all need to consume less and recycle, and well, of course, that's all well and good, and we should do those things. But as a solution to the problem? No, I think we have to act as though all politics are global. That's how we have to approach them. I mean, the fascist regime here in America allied with the now dozens of fascist regimes bubbling up around the globe. The problem with all politics is local is that implication that the solutions are local. So I think Tip O'Neill's catchy little phrase is too easily misinterpreted. It seems to refer to potholes. Well, all politics is local. I mean, that's advice from Tip O'Neill to his GOP representatives in the House. When you campaign for re-election, focus on the local issues. Don't get tied up in all this global hoop-de-doo. That's way over the heads of your constituents. They won't understand. They won't care. Don't worry their pretty little heads about nuclear war or climate crisis. Just talk about lowering their property tax, filling the potholes, having good roads and good schools. That's the lesson I get from all politics is local. And I don't like it. Under that formula, global problems are just left to masticize. We'll never get around to the climate crisis. We'll never get around to issues of war and peace. I think this is especially true today that we take a more global approach, especially at the state level. Attorneys general, governors, state legislatures, they are on the front line of resisting fascism. They play a huge role, even down to city councils, town councils, mayors' offices. How they're going to handle things like ICE, the ICE Gestapo. So in that sense, if I'm not overstaying the welcome here of my little phrase, that's the other way of interpreting all politics as local. The solutions have to be local. So maybe under that interpretation, it makes a little more sense. So that brings to mind the other phrase of the 1970s, think globally, act locally. They're kind of saying the same thing, I guess, but I think Tip O'Neill's is more easily misinterpreted. Think globally, act locally. That's more precise. And that's, I think, what we need to keep in mind. That phrase, by the way, I don't know if he coined the phrase, but he popularized the phrase. A guy by the name of René Dubos, a French-American environmentalist, at a 1970 UN climate conference. So I think that's the phrase we need to keep in mind. The election rigging currently being attempted by the U.S. regime, the xenophobic, violent response to immigration in many nations, including ours, tariff wars, shooting wars, Iran, Ukraine, major global issues that have local impact, certainly, taking our tax dollars, making our grocery prices, gas prices, home heating prices skyrocket. When the fascist regime withholds federal funds as extortion to acquire what they demand. So, for example, the regime tells a state or locality that they will turn over voting rolls, names, addresses, social security information, voter registration. Turn it all over to us. And if you don't do it, we are going to withhold emergency funds that save people from extreme weather, warning systems, emergency programs, relief funding. And now the controversy, well, I really shouldn't use that word, because there's practically unanimous agreement on flock cameras. If this is a local issue, well, it's been foisted upon us by national policy. The joint and coordinated efforts between huge for-profit private conglomerates and the nation state. Nobody wants flock cameras. They just suddenly appeared. We're China overnight, living in a surveillance state. And the problem pales in comparison to the granddaddy of them all, the AI data centers. Sprang up by the thousands before most people even heard the term. Didn't even know what they were. It's only within the last year that people have learned about AI data centers, their central role in surveilling every minute of our lives, in massive job loss, their role in military decision-making. Before we knew anything about them, they were creating targets by the thousands for Israel in Gaza, pinpointing who and what would be bombed among the civilian population of Gaza. Thousands of targets in Iran in an unannounced, undeclared war of the regime on that nation. Nobody wanted it, nobody asked for it. By the time we had any idea what was actually happening, at least 70% of Americans opposed the war, almost immediately. And unknown to most or all of us, maybe up to this day, the central role of AI data centers in all of this. A required first step to this bizarre new world, post-democracy. And that's not even to mention the more pedestrian problems, the more local problems, if you will. Use of energy, the fuel required to operate these AI data centers. They need their own power plants. They're the size of cities, of multiple cities. Adding to the climate crisis, emissions, impacting local utility costs, water usage. Ah, yes, now the local problems that we start to hear about. But all of this got such a head start. And nobody wants the data centers. Nobody. Apparently, the noise pollution alone is enough to drive you mad. So, if you hear anyone use the old phrase, all politics is local, there's a wrong way and a right way to interpret that. The wrong way is, no, it's all potholes and property taxes, and you needn't worry your pretty little heads about the rest. No, the more correct interpretation is all of it. The big issues, the big global issues that happen at a level that seems out of reach. Decisions made by prime ministers and presidents and trillionaire oligarchs. It means that the evil they're doing to the world reaches down right into our neighborhoods. And we better damn well be aware of those problems. and about how we can be part of the solution. Talking about whether or not all politics is local. One area where that seems to ring pretty true is in local elections. And we just had another round of primaries on Tuesday night that I'd like to talk about just for a minute. The phrase candidate quality has become very familiar over the last few cycles. Remember back in 2022 when MAGA candidates like Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, Kerry Lake, and there were many others, all kind of fell by the wayside. It was a question of candidate quality. And it's happening again this year. The Pillow Guy in Minnesota, several others being rejected. The Orange Menace endorsement not meaning that much these days. On the Democratic side of this equation, it's taking shape in the mixed results of so-called establishment candidates and the more left-wing, progressive, and some even DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, endorsed. Some card-carrying members. So Tuesday night, for example, in Florida, Angie Nixon won in a runaway over her establishment opponent in the Democratic primary. Now, there's no guarantee, of course, that she's going to win the general, but that's another story. Right now we're talking candidate quality. And if you've seen Angie Nixon speak, if you've seen her interviewed, she's got quality. Man, smart, articulate, to the point, very direct, unapologetic. It's just clear where she is, what she believes in, what she's fighting for. There can be no doubt. Just an excellent communicator as a candidate. As I said, there have been mixed results. A couple of more progressive candidates also lost on Tuesday night in Florida. All of this to say, the progressive insurgency is absolutely not over. Candidate quality matters. And the most important thing to say is that the progressives, the insurgency, have already won, at least phase one. They've been victorious. They've got their issues on the agenda, atop the agenda. Anti-data centers. 70, 80, 90% of Americans want nothing to do with data centers. At the very least, they want them put on pause until we can absolutely guarantee they're not going to do the harm we all fear. Taxing the rich, a billionaire's wealth tax, eliminating the Social Security cap. All of these issues are now absolutely mandatory. We have a new litmus test for all Democratic candidates. Some of these even apply to Republican candidates. They can't support data centers either. In fact, there's already a very effective anti-David Crowley ad here in Wisconsin. Tom Tiffany is running an ad devoted to what David Crowley has said in support of data centers. So that issue is on both sides of the aisle. The insurgents have absolutely redefined the priorities for 2026 and beyond. Supreme Court reform, banning stock trading for Congress, free child care, paid family leave, end Citizens United, pro-union, anti-Israel, anti-war. No Democratic candidate, however they identify as establishment, moderate, centrist, progressive, doesn't matter. The right position on these issues is now absolutely required. One of the biggest of all, of course, Medicare for all. And you'll remember it was only 10 years ago, the campaign of 2016. Bernie Sanders put this on the map. It was wild, it was crazy, it was fringe. And now Medicare for all, or some version of that, is a basic, standard, qualifying position that the base of Democratic and Democratic-leaning voters are demanding. So the insurgents have already won. There is no going back from these policy positions. Absolutely not. And it only opens the door for other positions that to some may still sound crazy. D.C. statehood for Puerto Rico if they want it. Real, genuine reform to the presidency and to the Senate. That's still one of the big, scary kind of boogeymen that the anti-DSA crowd still pulls out. Abolish the presidency, abolish the Senate. They put it in extreme terms. Just like they bring out abolish prisons, defund the cops, open the borders. Well, of course, they're lying about these issues. The very unfortunate phrase of defund the cops simply means rethink public safety, devote more resources to housing, education, all the things that prevent crime in the first place. Abolish prisons. There again, Angie Nixon, the new Senate candidate in Florida, had an excellent answer to that question. She said, yes, I want to abolish all private for-profit prisons. Yeah, you don't mess around. You speak directly. You speak the truth. And you don't apologize. She's great at it. If you haven't seen her, wait till you hear this woman. She's fantastic. So anyway, that's all just to say that there are some issues that will come in the future. But we're going to get back on track. For the first 250 years of this nation, or at least the first 200, it was about progress. It's only been in the last 40 or 50 that we decided that wasn't our thing anymore. The whole Make America Great Again, or I want my country back, these vapid little phrases, if they have any meaning at all, for me, it means let's get back at least on that 200-year track of progress. I understand 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step. I understand how that works. There are going to be fits and starts, sure. But we're on a very long and very bad streak of regression ever since Ronald Reagan. So the insurgents, the progressives, phase 1 is a victory. We've got all of these issues on the agenda, and they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And as you and I have said all along, the so-called establishment candidates, the moderates, the centrists, they're going to see the writing on the wall, and they're going to jump in front of the parade and pretend to lead it. Rahm Emanuel on Israel, prime example. Hakeem Jeffries on Supreme Court reform. We're already seeing it. Phase 2, then, is actually fighting for these issues. And phase 3 would be actually passing some legislation. So we still have a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. So now we got the midterms coming up. I keep saying we can't put all of our eggs in the election basket, but I also say we can't ignore them either. Some of the insurgents will win in the midterms. Some of them won't. They will continue to win in state and local races. More will win in the 2028 primaries and then in the 2028 general. The word socialism itself will continue to gain traction. The fear-mongering will become less and less effective as a tool. So it's happening. And those of us who want progress have to keep it on the top of the agenda. As these more traditional candidates see the writing on the wall, pretend to support these issues, we have to hold their feet to the fire, keep the pressure up, because there's only one thing they care about, and that's getting reelected. If they know this is the only path, that's the way they'll go. But we can't let them wiggle off the hook. Nope, we just cannot. All right. This and all episodes can be heard at the website, charlesburcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right, I love you. I'll see you out there.